The 36 state governors of the Federation take their security concerns to President Buhari behind closed doors in Abuja, perhaps a precursor to the president's much-anticipated visit to the National Assembly on Thursday to speak on rising insecurity. And the All Progressives Congress dissolves all party structures at the zonal, state and national levels in a bid to rebuild the party, as opposition PDP calls it a step towards political oblivion. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I am Kaido Kikyolu. There's so much happening in the nation's political arena at the moment. But top on that list is security, or insecurity, if you will. So let's start off at the President's office, where the 36 governors of the Federation, under the aegis of the Nigeria Governors Forum, had a sit-down with the President on the security situation in the country. And that follows the gruesome murder of over 40 farmers in Koshebe village, Borno State, exactly 10 days ago. Now, while the meeting was a closed-door session that focused on the security challenges in some parts of the country, Nigerians will have the opportunity, perhaps, to hear from the President firsthand on Thursday, December the 10th, at a joint session of the National Assembly. Recall the House of Representatives had resolved to summon the President to brief the Assembly on the true state of security in the nation. Well, the President agreed to honor that invitation, and Thursday was fixed. But let me take you down memory lane for a moment on the program tonight. It was 8 years ago, on June the 19th, 2012, when members of the House of Representatives resolved to invite then-President Goodluck Jonathan and his service chiefs, as well as the NSA, to explain his efforts towards addressing the security situation in the country at that time. But what is quite interesting about that incident 8 years ago is the involvement of one figure in both resolutions, the one we had 8 years ago and the recent one. Now, on that Tuesday, while the members deliberated on the killings and bombings in Kaduna and Yobe State, then Minority Leader Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila demanded the appearance of the President. And here's part of what he said at that time. He was Minority Leader of the House of Representatives at that time. He said, "The security situation has infringed on the fundamental rights of Nigerians to religion, peaceful assembly, freedom of movement, and right to life. We are not castigating him," referring to then-President Goodluck Jonathan, "but let us exchange ideas." Well, the House of Representatives passed that resolution coincidentally on a Tuesday also, but then-President spokesman Reuben Abati said the President will only honor the invite if he received an official letter. So the dates may have changed, but the security challenges still remain, and we'll preview the President's visit and the meeting he had with the Nigeria Governors Forum in a bit. But let's talk party politics also. It was a busy day at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, as the President earlier hosted the ruling All Progressives Congress's NEC meeting at the Council chambers and virtually. You recall the last time the APC had its NEC meeting was 5 months ago in June, and the outcome of which was the sacking of the Adams-Oshiomhole-led National Working Committee and the appointment of a 13-member caretaker committee led by Governor Mai Mala Buni of Yobe State. Well, the committee was given a 6-month mandate to organize a national convention as well as resolve some of the issues that had bedeviled the party, like the court cases, internal wranglings at the state and the national level. So just before those 6 months lapsed this month, the party's leadership now extended the tenure of a caretaker committee by another 6 months. But that's just one of the many resolutions to rebuild the party. As I said earlier, one of the resolutions is extension of a caretaker committee by 6 months till June the 30th, 2021. The dissolution of party structures at polling unit, ward, local government, zonal and state levels, with members of the dissolved executive to serve as caretaker members. Another resolution was the expulsion of Mr. Hilliard Etta, who was a vice chairman South-South, for not heeding the directive of the party that all legal cases were withdrawn from the court. And also the granting of waiver to existing and new members. Speaking of new members, the governor of Ebonyi State, Dave Umahi, was also at that meeting. But that's not all. The opposition People's Democratic Party is not letting this slide, calling it a step towards political oblivion. In a statement by the party's spokesman, Kola Ologbondiyan, the PDP is asking INEC to deregister the APC, saying that the party no longer has operational structures as required by law. Well, let's now bring you an issue which we've discussed over the past couple of days regarding the plan of the NGF to access pension funds in Nigeria. So we've heard from the Nigeria Governors Forum, we've heard from SERAP, which is asking the president to stop these proposals by the Nigeria Governors Forum. But if you take a look at that communique that was released after that meeting by the Nigeria Governors Forum, one agency of government that was mentioned is the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. So it's only fair to hear from the NSIA this evening. And we have joining us on the program, Mr. Uche Oji, who is the MD CEO of Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm sure you've been following the conversation from NEC. I mean, this proposal began at NEC, and Governor El Rufai was appointed to lead the committee to look into that proposal. And then NGF had a meeting, and this came up again at that meeting. In fact, part of the communique mentioned your agency. And of course, SERAP responded saying that it is unconstitutional, it is against the Pension Reform Act and all. So let me begin by asking you, so if SERAP says this is unconstitutional, talking about that proposal to access 2 trillion naira from pension funds, is there anything wrong from your perspective with the NGF's proposal?
I think there's all sorts of misunderstanding of what the proposal really is. And I speak to that only because this is a conversation that started November last year when the NSIA presented at the Governors Forum. And a committee was set up to explore how to make it easy for pension funds to invest. And I think it's key to understand the operative word here. It's an investment opportunity being presented to pension funds, as opposed to a statement that may connote a grab of the pension funds. That's just wrong. It's not correct. And that committee actually had the DG of PENCOM as a member of that committee. So NSIA was asked to join the committee, the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, the DG of PENCOM, everybody was in the committee. So that's the first point you need to understand. The second point was, how do we make it possible? Now, all over the world, pension funds invest in infrastructure. And the reason is very simple. Infrastructure projects have long periods of operating, and if structured properly, they provide you a stable source of cash flow. This is something that should be interesting to pension fund managers. And so it's about looking at viable projects, structuring them in a manner that makes it investable, and inviting the pension funds to look at it and decide whether to invest in it or not. At a certain point in the conversations, the pension fund administrators, one of their representatives, joined that meeting to see how we can structure these projects in a manner that makes it easy for investment, to put for the NSIA and for pension funds. It is not abnormal. The whole world, this is how it works. Pension funds invest in infrastructure only if they're economically viable and work, and it is at their option, to be honest.
Well, we'll talk about
now, the number, about 2 trillion naira, how it came up, was purely because the pension funds were asked, what is their strategic investment objective? How much can they go? And at that point, I think there were about 10 trillion naira, and they said it could go 20%. But the truth about it is, if we don't have viable projects that can absorb 20% of their funds, they will not invest in it. Don't forget, pension funds don't belong to anybody. Pension funds belong to people, they don't belong to government. These are people's funds. So your fund manager will take a decision to invest in it. So when a pension fund manager looks at its asset allocation, it includes infrastructure, it includes fixed income instruments. It might actually include a bit of equities. Those are the mandates of a pension fund administrator. So I
Right.
think it's important that it is clarified and people understand. And this is how the NSIA got involved in the first place.
Well, thank you for giving that background. But looking at what SERAP, the open letter which SERAP wrote to the president, they specifically said that this is unconstitutional and a breach of the Pension Reform Act. Well, you say that this is normal practice. So what part of that act empowers NSIA, the PFAs, to use pension funds in such manner?
No. See, again, back to the word use. Pension fund administrators have the money. Listen, these are your pensions, my pensions at the same time, right? So I expect the pension fund manager to invest and earn revenue such that when I retire, there is a stable source of income for me. So these are the things that pension funds will look at before they make an investment. So I am not even entirely privy to what SERAP wrote. I haven't seen it. But you invited me to speak to the role of the NSIA in this, and I said this is something that was designed. Now let me speak to you about what makes an infrastructure project viable. And part of it is because over time we have not actually focused on infrastructure in a manner that looks at the economic viability of projects. One of the projects that NSIA is involved in and is investing in is Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, an incredibly economically viable project. You're talking about a high traffic road, about 100,000 vehicles a day that will be towed. You're looking at a road where the right of way that's available to the concessionaire is 45 meters on either side of the median, with all the economic benefits of that, from right of way for those that want to run gas pipelines, telecom lines, power cables, businesses on that road, concessions, trailer parks. These are things that are economic opportunities for a road like that. The NSIA is looking to invest in it. Pension funds, if it's possible, should also invest in it. So I'm not sure where the lines crossed, but the reality is what we were looking at, and for the reason why we were involved in it, was in looking at how you turn infrastructure projects into economically viable investments that pension funds themselves will actually want to be part of. And I mentioned to you that at the time when this was being discussed, and it hasn't actually become operational because these are still being discussed and haven't really taken off
Mr.
yet.
Orji, if you could
Pension
hold on
funds were
for a
invited.
minute. Just a moment, pardon me. We'll take on some of these issues. We'll look into the act in a moment, but we'd like to take on another issue. So please stay with us. We'd like to take up an issue regarding the security of a nation, which I'm sure you're also interested in. And we have joining us on the program this evening, Mr. Femi Adesina. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on Politics Today. Now, there's a lot of talk around security. The Nigeria Governors Forum met with the president earlier today behind closed doors. Nigerians are counting down to that appearance of the president before joint session of the National Assembly. So clearly politics is top on the list of the government at this point. But if you could just give Nigerians a preview of some sort into the meeting which the president had with the NGF today, how would you describe it? Was it fruitful? What should Nigerians be expecting from that meeting?
Yes, it was quite a fruitful meeting. The governors of the 36 states were invited, and I think a large number of them turned up. It was not 100%, but it was near 100%, and it was across parties. They were unanimous in their commendation of the president that they asked for that meeting just 48 hours ago, and he consented, and the meeting held today. How it proceeded was that after the chairman of the Governors Forum, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, the governor of Ekiti State, spoke, he then invited a governor each from one geopolitical zone to speak and give an account of what was happening security-wise in their zone. So you heard from south, south, southeast, southwest. You heard from northeast, northwest, and north central. So one governor each gave the security account. And of course, you know what is peculiar to each zone. Banditry to northwest, insurgency to northeast, southwest, kidnapping, armed robbery, cattle rearers and farmers clashes. Each zone gave an account. And after that, Mr. President responded the governors who gave an account also, it was not a complete gallop. They also recounted what was being done, and they gave credit where it was due. So after that, the president responded, and they reviewed the situation together. Where promises needed to be made, he made those promises, and where explanations needed to be made, he equally made those explanations.
Okay, Mr. Additional, we're due for a break now. But when we return, we'll take a look at those promises that have been made, because a lot of Nigerians are thinking, so what should we expect from this meeting? That will form a major part of our conversation. And don't forget, we still have the MD CEO of NSIA with us. You're welcome back. Let's rejoin Mr. Femi Additional discussing security issues. You talked about some promises that were made. I'd like to ask you specifically, because the governor of Borno State had some demands, talking about hiring mercenaries, enrollment of youths in the Nigerian army and all that. So he's made those demands not once. So the question will be, did the president give any promise regarding those demands on mercenaries and, having youths from the Joint Task Force and all in the army?
No, not specifically. That did not come up. Well, I know one governor from the Northeast mentioned it in passing, but it was not something the meeting dwelt on. The promise the president made was that in terms of equipping, more equipment were being procured. Some had come, and there was a need to train our forces to use them, and that more will come. So he made promises in terms of equipping. And then he also encouraged the governors to also work in close contact with the traditional authorities and the local communities, because intelligence is a big part of the thing. And so he encouraged them that they should work together, the traditional authorities and the local communities, so that those who sabotage efforts of the military, particularly through giving information to the other side, can be encouraged to give adequate information to the military, so that the security situation can be properly tackled.
Okay, just one more thing. We would like to preview the president's, address, if you call it that, at the National Assembly on Thursday. But the question is, what format will it be? Will it be an address, an interaction, a closed-door meeting, or maybe all of that together?
No, that is a National Assembly function, and it's the National Assembly that would be in a position to speak on that.
So pretty much if the National Assembly says, well, we need to interact with you, then the president will accede to that request.
that question does not arise as far as I'm concerned now, because it will still be the National Assembly that will tackle that issue.
Well, Mr. Femi Additional, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program.
Thank you.
So let's rejoin Mr. Uche Orji, specifically now about, the provisions in the Pension Reform Act. Now, Section 86, 85 talks specifically about guidelines in using pension funds, says that, subject to guidelines issued by the Commission, funds and assets shall be invested in bonds, bills, and other securities or guaranteed by the federal government and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Like I said, Serap says this is against the Pension Reform Act. But looking through this act, under what provision does that infrastructure fund fall into?
Bonds, simply. Bonds, and if it's a federal government road, the structuring will be such that the road will be guaranteed. The income will be guaranteed, okay? Look, the same investment policy statements that guide pension funds in some ways also guides the NSIA. The NSIA is not, this is not about just building a road. The road will be a company, like a special purpose vehicle. Let's take example that the road I keep talking about, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Once the concession process is completed, there'll be a Lagos-Ibadan Expressway company that issues bonds that we will all invest in. Okay, the NSIA will invest. If the terms are all right for the pension funds, they too will invest. Okay, so once they invest, then it's now about what's the security package around the bond issuance. Is that security package a government guarantee, a state government guarantee or federal government guarantee. Those are all decisions that we as asset managers and the pension funds as fund managers will make. I think there's just a complete misunderstanding of what this program is. The road company will issue a bond, which, by the way, is done everywhere in the world. And the pension fund manager will decide whether the returns, the risk, and the security package around it makes sense. Then they'll make the investment. So don't misconceive this to be a raiding of the pension funds and using it to build roads. These are commercially viable entities, and it's only if they're commercially viable will the NSIA invest in it. The NSIA, by its own act, has the Nigerian Infrastructure Fund, is expected to also make returns. So these are projects that bonds you're investing in, issued by the project companies, and you will only invest if the terms work for you. And those terms include the returns, the tenure, the security package around it, i.e. the guarantees around the income you're about to make. And then you have the option to invest. So if
essentially,
you look at the Pension Reform Act, or the Pension Act that you've just quoted,
right,
I think it fits properly. And if the if the road company also has an equity option, and NSI chooses to take up some of the equity, why not?
So
now,
essentially, this is not a loan.
Profitable. Some roads are profitable, some roads are not profitable.
Right. So essentially, this is not a loan.
Rails.
Pardon me, I just need to clear this. So essentially, this is not a loan, it is a bond.
Of course.
Okay.
It's a bond instrument. So each of these project companies will issue bonds. Will issue bonds. And
you understand,
again, it depends on whether the terms are right, and then you can invest in it.
Right. You understand the concern of a lot of Nigerians. I mean, you may have seen that analysis on the state of states that says that, over 10 states are technically insolvent. They are unable to fund their recurrent expenditure obligations together with their loan repayment schedules due in 2019, with their respective total revenue. So that's the state of states. And now states taking up this, a lot of people are concerned. Is there any form of, stopgap, fail-safe measure to ensure that we don't get in trouble with this proposal?
There will be. Listen, the NSIA will not invest if the terms do not work. Okay? Like I said, it's not every project that will make it. Some projects will be viable, some will not be. Again, I keep going back to an example which we all relate to, and this is the one that, it keeps coming to my mind, the Lagos to Ibadan Expressway. And also beyond that, the NSIA is investing in the Abuja to Kano Highway. We're also investing in the second Niger Bridge. Each of these projects have their economic drivers, okay? Along that corridor, at the moment, the challenge we have with infrastructure in Nigeria is that we have never really been able to truly monetize infrastructure properly, all right? A road is not just a road, it's an economic corridor, right? We used to toll these roads, then we stopped. We need to go back to that. We used to actually make sure that the concessions are run properly. Who collects the income of that? It belongs to the road.
Right.
So there's a mentality change that needs to happen, and that is actually looking at this as economically viable opportunities. We have just allowed some assets to waste, and that doesn't make any sense. Look
just
at our
two
rails,
issues.
right? The Western line from Lagos to Kaduna to Kano, there are parts of it that are not great, but if you fix it up, you can actually turn that to a proper economic project that people can not just pay fare for the rail,
right,
move a lot of cargo on it, but also build warehouses along the economic corridor. So you need to look at infrastructure as an economic investment. That, I think, is the mentality change that needs to happen.
Two issues.
Then you look at some of these roads and say, these ones will work.
Right.
Please.
Pardon me. I mean, two issues before we wind down, because there are a lot of issues to take up with you. So it would appear as though prior to this point, pension funds have been invested in Nigerian infrastructure funds, right?
Well, I haven't seen the bonds that they have actually invested in, but I suppose there's been some Sukuk funds that were issued. I'm not sure whether pension funds invested in those, but if you look at the Sukuk funds, bonds that were raised and used to develop roads, and I don't run a pension fund, so I don't know if they invested in it. If they invested in it, that's an investable opportunity. So I wouldn't say they have not, or they have. I don't run a PFI, I run the NSIA, but the NSIA is looking to invest in these things. And in designing some of these projects, the Pension Commission sent a representative who sat through the entire deliberation. And I think that's important to understand. So when it's come across, there are some roads, okay, I'll give an example, Benin to Warri Road, 48,000 vehicles a day. From what I have been told, I could be wrong, I don't know the exact number. Sorry, that's Abuja Kano. Benin Warri Road, there's a traffic count being done, but I've been told it looks like something that would be viable. Maybe that will work. We're looking at Abuja to Lokoja, connecting the Lagos-Ibadan way. Again, something that the traffic count seems to, I mean, I did a drive across there this morning myself just to check what the traffic count looks like. These are things that we are actually going to be looking at.
Well, because the reason I ask about, using pension funds specifically is because I recall that plan in 2017 to have, you know, the NSW, if that's the Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund, setting up a company, recall with that London-based local currency guarantee firm, to establish or to enable pension funds to be invested in infrastructure funds, which is why I ask. But as we round off on this topic, the chairman of Nigeria Governors Forum spoke on an irrevocable payment order. What does that mean?
Sure. So, again, there are quite a number of things. Irrevocable standing payment order is an order that's issued by, if it's a project in a state, the state will then be backed by a standing payment order. That is your security package. It means that every month the state will make a certain amount of payment into the project company. So projects that are within states and the state's irrevocable standing payment order is viable and people believe in it, then we will do those roads. So most states will benefit from this, those who are viable.
Right.
Where the ISPOs, as they're called, are actually things that we, and before an ISP is issued, the Debt Management Office signs off on it, the Ministry of Finance signs off on it, which means by the time it's coming to the point of investors coming into it, all boxes are ticked.
Well, clearly,
so the pension funds themselves will invest in it. There's a road, so we set up a company called InfraCredit.
You know, clearly the devil is in the details of this one.
Aramco.
I said clearly the devil is in the details,
Well,
and at least you have shed some light
like
into
every investment,
this.
which is why I think the reaction needs to wait first. The reaction needs to wait first and get all the details first.
Well, at least we have some information.
React. And again, like I said, we're an investor in it.
Yeah, right. Well, we have to run now, but we have to thank you so much, Mr. Uche Orji, the MD CEO of NSI, for at least shedding some light on this proposal by the NGF. But definitely the conversation is not over. Thank you for your time. Well, that's the program for tonight. Thank you for watching. I am Kayode Okikiolu. Bye for now.